We think our focus should be on how the food gets from the farm to the market for the average local farmer here as compared to the large chains that import food from all over the world. Their methods must differ vastly from each other, and that most likely affects the quality of the products.
Okay, a food mile is the distance food travels from the farm to the local store. According to the USDA, there's no consensus on a definition of local or local food systems in terms of geographic distance between production or consumption.
During the course Local Eating, we read many articles that related to our focus and contributed to our research of food miles. In week 3, we read an article by Mark Bittman. In his piece, Local Food, No Elitist Plot, he explains a problem with the American agriculture trade system. The United States is the world's largest producer of wheat, soy, corn, and dairy products, but we still are net importers of fruit and vegetables. The problem Bittman sees in importing our fruits and vegetables is that the United States could grow these products locally, but instead we develop a dependence on other countries for our produce. This relates to the transport focus because the produce we depend on travels long distances. Their food miles grow to incredibly large numbers when we are capable of growing the produce on our own land. According to Bittman, we'd be more secure and better served, and our land would be better used. What he is saying is that by lowering food miles, growing and transporting locally, we can gain independence from other countries, and the food we eat would be much more fresh. Mark Henkel of Henkel's Herbs and Heirlooms seems to agree strongly. In an interview conducted with Henkel, a local farm and business owner, he said that local food is the best tasting and the best to eat. Henkel's food travels only a small distance and is regionally grown and sold. But according to the USDA website, there is no limitation on distance that food can be transported and be considered local. This contributes to a food miles problem within our own country. Produce can be transported all the way from the West Coast to Lexington, Kentucky and be considered locally grown. But the wear and negative effects of food miles still apply to the produce, and the fossil fuels burned to power the transport are still used in excess. Chipotle, a restaurant mentioned in our video as a local consumer, has this statement on their website. The less distance food has to travel, the better. It just makes sense. Sourcing local food reduces food miles, supports local economies, and ensures fresh, great-tasting seasonal produce. Chipotle defines local as within 350 miles from the producer to consumer. They then go on to say that not all of their products are local, but about 50% are. Would you consider food transported from Chicago, Illinois to Lexington, Kentucky local? This distance is 20 miles further than Chipotle's local limit. This means that Chipotle still has to use the large semi-truck transports that receive 7 miles to the gallon. If the food did move 350 miles, that's 50 gallons of gas use. Could that be considered an effort to preserve the environment? If you asked Mark Bittman, he would probably appreciate the use of American soil. But if you asked Mark Henkel, he would most definitely disagree. In our interview with Henkel, he said a local market within 400 miles allows producers to be deceptive of their marketing practice, labeling their food locally grown.
The distance food travels varies. Transfer and food miles can add up quickly. Reports done by the World Watch Institute say American food travels on average from 1,500 miles to 2,500 miles. In Kentucky, food is very diverse. There are many options because we have food from all over the world. Foods along with the ideas behind them are here from other lands, but food ingredients are more often than not grown locally. America is a melting pot. Just like the food brought to the consumer at these restaurants, the culture is brought along too. These transported cultures can range halfway across the globe, or a different region of the United States. The Krakow bagel brought a part of the Jewish culture to America in places close to the West African grill, which transports culture thousands of miles right to our neighborhood. These local restaurants serving distant cultural traditions integrate to local culture by using Kentucky Proud ingredients and food grown by farmers in our backyard. Kentucky Proud is a movement to lower food miles by using produce and ingredients from Kentuckian restaurants and stores. Even though the culture has been transported thousands of miles, these restaurants like Chipotle, Sal's Grill, and the local taco lower their food miles by using Kentucky ingredients. We interviewed Mark Hinkle, and he stands by the farmers markets and that local food tastes better and is fresher. Local businesses pick their fresh food and bring directly to the farmers market. He brings all his stuff so he can try and sell as much as he can. He says it's beneficial to purchase local food because the money goes right back into the community. He wishes government was not all up the local farmer's business because he does not grow his crops and produce with pesticides and whatnot. He has some customers that will drive larger distances to get this local food of his because they like it so much. So it's worth it to take the trip.
Welcome to Kentucky, a thriving hub of diversity. Here we see Chipotle, Mexican food. Is Kentucky in Mexico? I believe not. Is Kentucky in Egypt? Again, I think no. Here we have yet another Mediterranean grill, and just down the same street, African cuisine. Kentucky, yet we have food from all over the world. What does that mean? The ideas and thoughts behind these foods, the recipes were transmitted from person to person, families that came here seeking a better life. These foods, the ideas behind them are from other lands, but the ingredients are more often than not grown locally. If you'll go into the Chipotle, you'll see that the majority of the vegetables they use are grown here, and they proudly display that fact on their menu. Not only was the food from these cultures transported here, but the culture itself, because America is a melting pot.
Our focused transport has evolved. It went from the logistics, starting out by looking at what pickup truck these local farmers were using. We decided it was a 95 Ford pickup truck. And then it went on a bigger scale, like a semi-truck that gets 7 miles to the gallon. Our focus went directly from the logistics of transport to food miles, how food loses its freshness. According to the Knoxville Academy of Nutrition and Diabetics, spinach loses 50 to 90% of its vitamin C after just 5 days of being picked. This relates to food being transported long distances. On a local scale, a farmer can pick the food and the next day sell it at the market. But food that's transported across the country to restaurants or large markets like Kroger or Walmart, the food has lost some of its nutritional value, which is bad for the consumer. We then moved on to American agriculture and how America relies on other countries for our fruits and vegetables. The problem with this transport, like Mark Bittman said, is it creates a dependence on other countries for food that we can grow on our own soil. This food is being transported a long distance, it's losing nutritional value, and we're basing our reliance on fruits and vegetables on other countries when we can just grow it ourselves. We then moved on to cultural transport, how cultures come in with the transported food. In Lexington we have places like Sal's Grill and Mediterranean Grills. These foods are from different cultures that have been transported to Lexington, carried with their people, who carried their ingredients and ideas. Just like the Krakow bagel, a Jewish bagel brought over to America from Polish bakers. In A Short History of the Bagel, Joan Nathan describes how Jewish culture is brought into America with this food. Our focus then moved on to the actual definition of local. Mark Hinkle, a man we interviewed at the farmers market, said that the USDA defines local as 400 miles, which he considered a very long distance and allows farmers to be deceptive in their marketing practice. The USDA actually has no limit on what can be called local food. We looked into Chipotle, a restaurant that said they use local ingredients, and on their website they say they use 50% local ingredients, which they consider food that's within 350 miles of the restaurant.
And worked at one of my favorite restaurants.
Do you consider this local? Food that's transported 350 miles? Many people don't, like Mark Hinkle.
Taste critically. Delicious.
With the information presented, it's up to you, the consumer, to decide. Has the label local been distorted by transportation? And could you really consider local It's also important to take into account the fossil fuels that are burned by the trucks, the local farmers' trucks, or even the transport that's used to transport the food across other countries. You need to take into account that food loses its freshness when it's transported long distances. After learning all that we've learned in this course, our group, 6, decided that it is better for our land, for Kentuckians, and for all of the country to start using local. And by local we mean food that's grown in your community.